Hello and welcome to this lecture. And in this lecture, we are going to talk about database and models. Now, we already know what views in Django are and how views actually work and how they are used to represent some sort of HTML or some simple text onto a web page. But now, as in this particular course or in this particular section, we want to design a food application, that is an application which displays some details of different types of foods. We actually need to have a database. Now, I hope you guys already know what a database is, but for those of you who don't know, a database is nothing but a place where information is stored in a tabular format. So to imagine how data is stored in a database, let's say if you want to store some data related to students. For that, you create a table in a database called as students. And this table or the database table is going to have multiple columns like the name, age, marks, address of that particular students, which are nothing but the attributes of the student table. And then you can go ahead and add data of multiple students into that table in a tabular format. So this is how databases generally work. Now let's talk about what exactly are models. Now in Django we have this models.py file right here. So what exactly is model? Now a model is not exactly a database or a database table, but they are actually a blueprint to create these tables. So these models right here actually define the structure of how these tables will be created. That is, these models define which columns the table would have, what would be the name of the table, what would be the multiple fields inside the table, and their data types as well. Now, once we know about databases and models, now we need to understand what kind of database does Django use and how exactly can we connect this Django application with a database. For our convenience, Django actually comes with a pre-installed and a pre-configured database, which is SQLite 3. So if you want to know which database Django is using, you can simply go to the settings.py file right here. And if you scroll down a little bit, as you can see, we already have the information related to database over here, which is configured. So as you can see, the database engine which Django uses is SQLite 3. So that means Django is using SQLite 3 as its database. But let's say, for example, if you want to use some other database, you can just go ahead, install that database and just configure that database in the settings.py file. But for now, we are going to just go with SQLite 3 for learning purposes. Okay, now once you know which database Django uses, let's scroll up a bit and let's see what kind of other things do we have in here. So as you can see, if we scroll up over here, we also have this particular thing which is called as install app. This list actually gives you information of all the apps which are currently installed in your project. Now these are nothing but all the apps which are activated in the particular Django instance. And one more interesting thing to note here is that we have not made these apps. These are the by default apps which the Django project uses. Now you might also notice that we have also made our own app, which is the food app, but you will notice that that app is not present right over here. So we are going to add that over here very soon. But even before that, let's understand why exactly does Django have all these installed apps listed over here. So the main reason for that is because some of these applications here make use of at least one database tables. And hence what we need to do is that we need to create tables out of these apps right over here even before we can use them. So now if you actually go to the server, as you can see, you always get this warning right over here whenever you run your server, which is that you have 15 unapplied migrations. So what exactly does Django mean by you have unapplied migrations? So what Django says is that you have these apps over here, which is these apps, and some of these apps might be using database tables. And now what you have to do is that you have to go ahead and create the tables which are required for these apps. So in order to create that, you simply have to execute this command, which is python manage.py migrate. So I'll just go ahead and execute that command and let's see what exactly happens. So I'll type in Python 3 manage.py migrate, and when I go ahead and hit enter, as you can see, it says apply all migrations, admin auth, content type, sessions, and it actually runs some basic migrations over here. So what exactly happened over here? So what the migrate command actually does is that it looks at all the apps which are under the installed apps over here and create necessary database tables according to the database settings in a settings.py file. Now this actually worked, but now we need to create our very own database as well, because this migrate command actually created the database which were required by the system and it did not create our database. So let's go ahead and learn how to create that. So as I earlier mentioned, whenever you want to create a database, what you need to do is that you need to define a blueprint over here in the model. So how exactly can you do that? So in Django, whenever you want to create a model is created by using a class. So right now over here, as we want to save the food items, what we do is that we create a model which is called as item. So let's go ahead and create that. So I'll type in class item, and then it needs to inherit from the class which is models.model. So I'll type in models.model, and now what we do is that we define which fields do we want to store in this particular class item. So let's say we want the item underscore name, so we type that equals, and then you also need to define the data type of this particular field. So this is going to be a character field, so we type in models dot car field, and in here you also need to define the maximum length of this particular field. So I'll type in max underscore length and I'll equate it to 200. Now let's go ahead and add some more fields here. So let's say we also have item description, so I'll type in item underscore desc, and this is also going to be models dot car field. Let's say the max length of this thing is going to be also 200. And now let's have an integer field over here. So let's say we also want to add the price of that particular item. So I'll type in item underscore price. That's going to be models dot, and now instead of having character field over here, I'll have integer field because this thing is going to be an integer. So now once we are done defining this particular model, means that we have a blueprint for having a database table called as item. Now what we need to do is that we need to create an actual database table from this particular model. So how exactly can we do that? So we already know that in order to create a database table, we need to use the migrate command, which we have used right over here. And the way in which migrate command actually works is that it goes into your settings.py file, which is this file right here, and it's going to look into the installed apps and create database tables for those apps. And right now we have actually defined the model for our food app, but if you have a look over here, we do not have the description of food app over here in the install apps. So our first job is to go ahead, go into the install apps and add our food app over here. So how exactly can we do that? So if you just go to apps.py over here, as you can see, it has a class which is called as food config. So we simply need to copy that, and now just go back to the settings.py file, and in here just add the food app as foods.app. And then simply paste in food config over here, give a comma, and you're good to go. So now whenever you run the migrate command, Django actually understands that it also needs to create the database for the food app as well. So this should actually be food, not foods. So now whenever you go ahead and execute the migrate command, it's automatically going to create the database for you. So now let's go ahead, save the code and start creating the database. So now let's go ahead, and the first thing which you need to do is that even before you execute the migrate command, you need to first tell Django that you have made some changes to your database model, because as you can see, we have actually made changes to this file right here. And whenever you make some change over here, you need to convey that to Django. So how exactly can we do that? We do that by using a simple command which is called as make migrations. So in here we will type in Python 3 manage.py make migrations, and we type in food here, as food is our app name to which we have made changes. So when we go ahead and hit enter, I guess we do have some issue in the code. So let me just head back over here, and in the settings.py file, I guess, okay, this should actually be apps, not app, because if you actually look over here, we are referring to this particular file right here, and now it should work fine. So let's go back and again type in the command which is python 3 manage.py make migrations food. Okay, so we again have another error over here. So it says, and it got an unexpected keyword argument max length. Okay, I actually made a typo over here as well. Okay, so let me just fix that, and I'm extremely sorry for that. I can actually go ahead and remove these errors, but it's always good to know how exactly you can go ahead and debug some minor errors over here. So that actually happens a lot. So now let's go ahead and again execute python 3 manage.py make migrations food, and now yeah, it has actually created the model which is item. So what this make migration command actually does is that it's going to have a look at the models in your app, and it's going to actually look for changes, and it's going to incorporate those changes in Django. So right now, looking at our models.py file, Django actually understood that we have created a model, and it creates a model up over here. Now remember, we have not created the database table yet. We have just added a model over here. Now we need to go ahead and create an actual table from here. So in order to do that, we simply go ahead and type in python 3 manage.py SQL migrate food, and then we type in 0001 because we have this 0001 over here. We just type it in over here, and now once we go ahead and hit enter, as you can see, it has executed the create table command right over here. And once we go ahead and do that, the final command which we type now is that we type in the migrate command, which is actually going to create the table for us. So I'll type in python 3 manage.py migrate and hit enter. So as you can see, now it applies all the migrations, and our database tables are going to be successfully created in the backend. Okay, so finally we have created our database tables, and in the next lecture we will learn how exactly can we go ahead and add some data to these database tables right over here. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.